Hello, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to this afternoon session for Lifelong Learning Week. For those of you who have not seen me yet this week, my name's Heather. I'm from Career Map and I'll be your host for this session. Today we're joined by Warwick Business School, and in this session we'll be talking about how to develop an entrepreneurial mindset, and we will dispel myths and discuss the psychology around the subject too. So it's poised to be really interesting. Just a bit of housekeeping for those of you who don't know. Any questions that you've got can be asked in the chat box on the right hand side of the page. So if you just pop your questions in as the session goes along, I'll collect them all and we'll do a Q&A at the end. But aside from that, that's everything you need to know from me. I'll hand over to the team and I'll see you for the Q&A.
Hi everybody, I'm Nav. I'm one of the business development managers here at Warwick Business School. We're really proud to be joining Lifelong Learning Week this week. I think it's the first time we've ever joined Lifelong Learning Week, but it's something that's incredibly important to us to make sure that everybody has access to high quality programs and that they're accessible. So we're really proud to be part of it this week. Just a quick overview of what to expect today. I'm going to do a very quick welcome and introduction to Warwick Business School before I hand over to Tamara, who is going to give us a lightning talk on entrepreneurial mindset. We're then going to be joined by Sean and Susanna, around 20 to 2, who are going to share more about their entrepreneurship journey and their experiences before we take questions and close. So for those of you who aren't familiar with us, we work at Business School. We have 2 campuses, one based in quite close to Coventry in the Midlands, and another over at the Shard in London, where we do executive education. And for those of you who aren't familiar with executive education, it's a term which kind of encompasses programs which are designed for people who have a couple of years of managerial experience. So the one you're probably most familiar with will be the MBA. We deliver the MBA in 3 different modes. There's the full-time, which is 1-year program, and then there's the executive MBA and the online program, which are 2-year programs. And these programs are traditionally known for people who want to move up the ladder in their career, but increasingly we're seeing candidates who want to embark on the MBA because they want to change their careers, which seems to be in line with the trend of not having a linear career anymore and having more of a squiggly career where you have a number of different careers during your work lifetime. The lesser known program is the Warwick Leadership Pathways program, which is kind of unique to us. The Warwick Leadership Pathways leads to a postgraduate diploma at level 7 in a number of different subjects, all which are key strategic areas of challenges for organisations. And we're really proud to say that this year we've opened up the framework further on the Warwick Leadership Pathways programme. So you can do it in a more flexible format, making it a lot more accessible. So previously you had to do 4 modules in a project which led up to your diploma, but the opening up of the framework allows you to do 1 module, which will give you a postgraduate award in 1 topic. And over 5 years or sooner, if you choose to, you can stack this up to get your postgraduate diploma. But each module will lead to a postgraduate award and make you alum of the school. This then can also be used to gain exemptions for the MBA if you want to carry on that lifelong learning experience. We do have an open day which is going to discuss the Warwick Leadership Pathways in more detail next week, so I'm not going to labour on the programme detail here, but you're welcome to join us for that session next week if you are interested, and I'll share the link to the registration in the chat room. So I'm now going to hand over to Tamara. So Dr. Tamara Friedrich is our Associate Professor in Entrepreneurship and Innovation, and she has a particular research interest in creative problem solving. So if you are going into the entrepreneurship space, or if you're there already, that's probably a skill that you do want to grasp. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Tamara. Over to you, Tamara.
Great, thanks so much. Hi everyone, thank you for attending today. I'm so pleased to be a part of this session and the broader week. I hope you're finding it really useful. So like Nev said, I am an associate professor in the Warwick Business School. But my background is as an industrial and organizational psychologist. So my training is applying psychological principles to the workplace. So things like leadership, motivation, creativity, and mindsets. And more recently, my research focuses on creativity and creative problem solving, but also leadership. And I've been teaching lately on entrepreneurial mindset. So hopefully in our short lightning round today, I can give you a taste of what a lesson, a lecture, a broader term on entrepreneurial mindset might be, and maybe help you as you're developing your career aspirations and thinking possibly about being an entrepreneur. I have a personal passion for sort of opening the doors to what people perceive creativity and entrepreneurship to mean. Both of these areas have a lot of myths about them, and people have this sort of mental model of what it means to be creative, what it means to be an entrepreneur. And really, one of my big passions is about breaking that open and seeing and helping people see themselves in that space. So today we are talking about entrepreneurial mindset. First, I want you to think about what you picture when someone says entrepreneurship or entrepreneur. Who immediately pops to the forefront of your mind? I'll give you a minute to think about it. You can put it in the chat if you want, or you can just think it to yourself, but try to picture someone and the first person that you picture. So if we're honest in thinking about who maybe pops into our mind first, a lot of that will be influenced by the images that we see regarding entrepreneurship. And a lot of times those images look like this. So a lot of the big stories on entrepreneurship in the media, stories that we even tell within business schools have to do with a certain subset of entrepreneurs. A lot of times it's very big organizations. More recently, it's really focused on high tech, high growth organizations. And when we see images of entrepreneurship, one of the perceptions that people have, and we see this in the research when people picture entrepreneurs or think about stereotypes regarding entrepreneurs, it's often images that are related to men, especially white men, especially men of a certain age, kind of in the middle of their careers. And there's also this impression that entrepreneurs have a certain personality type. They're a bit more ruthless. They work on their own. Maybe they make a lot of sacrifices in terms of their life and their families. And to some degree, there's some patterns there, but really, entrepreneurship, this myth is not true. So entrepreneurship is something that we see across domains. It's not just in tech. It's not just men. We do see a higher proportion of men in entrepreneurship, but entrepreneurship is something that everyone is capable of and everyone can achieve. It's about shifting those perceptions and that mindset about what entrepreneurship means. Okay, so we see in the chat we had Jeff Bezos, Elon, and Musk. So they were both on that screen. So hopefully, I try to dispel this myth that it's open for everyone. And actually that having this prototype in your mind of what an entrepreneur is can be detrimental if you don't see yourself fitting into that type of person, into that role. And so we try to dispel those myths. And really, some of the research says some of those myths and what we hold to be the prototype of an entrepreneur might actually be wrong. That sleep is good for entrepreneurship, that having connections and a healthy, well-balanced life is good for entrepreneurship, that not being this ruthless, solo, individualistic person is not necessarily good for entrepreneurship. So breaking down not just myths in terms of who can enter, but how they behave is important for helping people be more successful. Another myth is that when we think of entrepreneurship, we think of startups, that it's exclusively, one or two people or maybe a small team, when really entrepreneurship is much broader than that. We also often focus on high growth or unicorn type startups, but really entrepreneurship has a wide range of activities that you could be involved in. It might be that you acquire a business that already exists. You can found a business with a well-established business model, so it doesn't have to be something absolutely revolutionary. So there's lots of types of creativity and innovation, and it doesn't have to be completely rewriting the book. So, purchasing an existing business isn't completely revolutionizing a whole area, but you're still an entrepreneur. You're seeing value and opportunity to be gained. You can create a social enterprise. So increasingly, we're seeing organizations that focus on social needs, environmental needs, and that might be where your passion lies. So again, it doesn't have to be, and we talked about this, I think Suzanne and Sean will talk about this later in their motives for starting their businesses, that not everyone starts down this road to entrepreneurship because they want to be these high growth entrepreneurs. Maybe they want autonomy in their life, and control of over the direction of their career. And maybe they want flexibility. Maybe they want to make a social impact. Maybe they want to pursue something that they really enjoy, like a hobby or a craft, and make money from that. So there's a lot of drivers for why people pursue entrepreneurship, and it doesn't have to be a high growth organization. A third myth is that there's this entrepreneurial personality, and I've talked a little bit about this already. One of the research projects that I have currently is where we asked a wide population of the general public to come up with words to describe what they felt an entrepreneur is. And there was a very clear pattern of very aspirational, motivated, creative, which you might expect. But there's words that maybe, especially those of us that teach entrepreneurship, were disturbed to see come very low in the list or not appear at all. Things like listening and empathy. And really, the research would tell us that those types of things are important for being a successful entrepreneur. So while people do believe that there is an entrepreneurial personality, there's really not a clear formula for what makes someone most likely to be successful. There's a few things where we see that it'll make you more likely to pursue entrepreneurship and potentially be successful in some ways, but there's so much variability across the type of entrepreneurship. So again, whether you're focused on a social enterprise or high tech or biomedical, the characteristics that you'll need, the networks that you'll need will vary across those industries and levels of entrepreneurship. But some general things that we do see in the research are things like entrepreneurial self-efficacy, so believing that you can do it, tolerance of failure. This doesn't mean complete risk tolerance or lack of fear, and I'll talk about that in a second. Alertness to opportunities, so people that are generally open-minded, that look for ways to improve themselves or improve the world around them. Self-confidence, so that it does take some self-confidence to get started, but you'll be surprised how a lot of entrepreneurs actually, aren't these overly self-confident individuals. They just build in practices to promote their confidence and pursue their personal development. And a higher need for achievement than the general public. So they do set goals and achieve goals a bit more than the average person. But there's this interesting thing that Miller proposes, which is the Janus effect. So Janus is the god of transition, so things like from war to peace and peace to war. And he says that there's some characteristics of entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs that we can kind of see easily shift to things that aren't necessarily good for success for themselves or for society as a whole. So where we see maybe high energy, it could lead to aggressiveness. Self-confidence can lead to narcissism, need for achievement, ruthlessness, and over-focus on independence and their own goals may lead to irresponsibility to others. So we, in thinking about the prototypical characteristics that we see related to entrepreneurship, we might see the things on the left-hand side, and as these individuals move and those behaviors get ingrained, it might start to shift into the other side, and we need to balance those characteristics. And also sometimes, because we expect maybe these characteristics, that entrepreneurs will be a bit more aggressive and single-minded in their mission, we forgive a lot until it starts to harm others. So I think we've seen some cases recently where very high-level entrepreneurs maybe shift into that right-hand side, and then there's a bit of a fallout or reckoning of the outcomes of their behavior for their organization and for those outside of the organization. So I alluded to this fear of failure aspect earlier, and there is this myth that entrepreneurs just jump. They don't have any fear of failure, that they are not averse to taking risks. But really, the truth is that entrepreneurs do take risk, but they do have fear. They just manage that fear. So this is a great paper by Gabri Cazziati and James Hayden. James Hayden is at Warwick Business School, and they looked at the types of fear that individuals have as they go through the entrepreneurial process, and those that continue on and those that didn't. And it's not that starting a venture means you have this absence of fear, that you just go, regardless of how risky it is or not. What they actually found is that there's different types of fear, and that there's different ways in which entrepreneurs manage those types of fear in order to be successful. So the three main types of fear that they identified is this fear related to our own identity. That am I going to live up to my own impression of myself? If I fail, what does that mean for who I am? Especially as we talked about, they tend to be a bit more achievement oriented. So if I fail, what does that say about myself? And one of the things they said, entrepreneurs do in order to manage that particular form of fear is to focus on self-development and continually improve your skill set and look for ways to build up your capacity to be successful, to minimize that fear. The second one is a fear of unknown, and I think this applies to every industry, every type of role. I think humans generally are afraid of the unknown. And one of the things they say to do is sort of this lean startup approach, if you're familiar with that, is this act, learn, build, to start incrementally and have small tests, not focus so much on the end goal, but constantly incrementally developing what it is you're trying to achieve. And the final one is fear of social rejection. So what will others think of me? What will those in my network or maybe my peers or other alumni think of me if I take this risk and it doesn't work out? And so some of the things that entrepreneurs will do in order to manage this fear is to engage with mentors. So those in the network that understand the entrepreneurial process, understand the potential for failure, and also build a network of other entrepreneurs or those who have resources related to their venture, to build up this social cushion around themselves of people who will understand the potential fears and risks there. And so the final myth is that entrepreneurship can be learned. Happy to say, for my own job security and for us in the business school and for you, entrepreneurship can be learned. But a lot of times the focus on entrepreneurship training is really on those traditional forms of business practice, things like finance. But those are very important. But we more recently are seeing the importance of a tool set related to the psychology of entrepreneurship. Things like being proactive, having personal initiative, and the mindset you have going into the entrepreneurial process actually, in some cases, have shown to be more important to predicting the success of entrepreneurs in the short and long term, relative to just traditional business practices. So what is a mindset? A mindset is a set of attitudes that shift our behavior. So we know from loads of psychology research that attitudes are related to behavior and predict our behavior. One way to think about attitude, or one example of how attitudes might shift behaviors, for instance, if you have a global mindset versus a local mindset, you might be more open to moving abroad. You might be more open to issues around sustainability because you see the global implications of your actions rather than just the local implications of your actions. Another way to think about mindsets is growth versus fixed mindset. You might have heard of growth mindset. It's a topic and concept that's being talked about a lot, including in schools, especially here in the UK. And it's an idea put forth by Carol Dweck. And it's around this idea that we have the mindset that we believe our talents are either fixed or something that can be developed. So a fixed mindset, I believe that my talents are innate. I am who I am, and it's something that I cannot necessarily change. Whereas a growth mindset is a belief that I feel like I can develop myself. There's opportunity to grow in my skills. being here today in this session is an indicator that you probably have a growth mindset, at least in your career. We have varying mindsets across our life. So I might have a growth mindset when it comes to my teaching or my research, but maybe a fixed mindset when it comes to my athletic ability. But there's opportunities to develop our mindsets and develop more of a growth mindset across different areas of our life. So an entrepreneurial mindset is the ability to quickly sense, take action, and get organized under uncertain conditions. It's a cognitive ability. What you don't see on this slide is any mention of starting a business. It's really focused on this ability to see opportunities and be flexible in our thought in uncertain circumstances. And I like to tell my students it's like putting on a set of goggles, putting on a set of sunglasses, and seeing the world in a way in which you look for opportunities to gain value, to improve yourself or the lives of others. And there's three sort of elements of the entrepreneurial mindset. There's what you think, there's what you feel, and there's what you do. So the cognitive aspect might be things like the thinking skills that you develop and your ability to see opportunities, your creative problem solving skills. So those are things that I might teach in my creative problem solving lectures, and I'll touch a little bit on it later. The emotional aspect of the entrepreneurial mindset is really looking at how we draw from our passions and how those affect our entrepreneurial behavior. One of the things that I like to have my entrepreneurship students do at the start of a module is to list all of their passions, interests, skills, talents, and look specifically about at how each of those could be related to a business. And you might mix them up. So you might take, put it on, there's an activity where we put it on a dice and you roll it and you get a few random ones and you try to combine it into a business idea, just to get at this approach that you can draw business ideas specifically from the things that you are interested or passionate about. There's also an emotional aspect to entrepreneurship in the way in which we develop our ideas and the way that we work with our customers by taking a more empathetic approach and making that emotional connection between the entrepreneur and those that they are working with or those that they are serving, either their customers or clients in other forms. And then there's the behavioral aspect, what we actually do. So in order to take the idea and put it into action, we actually do have to have these entrepreneurial behaviors like gathering resources, testing ideas, and pitching the idea, and ultimately, hopefully, implementing the business. There's two general views on entrepreneurship, causation versus effectuation. Causation is this sort of typical view of I have an idea, I make a business plan, I gather my resources, I implement the business. It's very linear. It kind of sees it as pulling together different pieces of the puzzle. And we're very focused on an outcome, a specific outcome. An alternative view, and one that's become much more common, is the effectuation view. So we kind of have a general idea of what we want to go, but we're open to the fact that the path may be a bit windier, that we might have to adjust our expectations, or we may even shift our whole business model in the process. It works under the assumption that the future is uncertain, resources are uncertain, customer expectations may be uncertain. And so it's more about building a set of resources and mindset around how we will continue to adapt as we work towards a goal. And they are different in their kind of views of failure. So if we take the causation view that there's this single goal we're working towards, failure is a big deal and it's a bit scarier because it means we missed that one single mark we were aiming for. But if we take the effectuation view, it's like, okay, well, we're going to pivot. Okay, that didn't work. Failure's okay. We're going to learn from it. We're going to incrementally improve and work towards something else. It's also about being open-minded in the process of how people react to your idea, and you might need to adapt to it, and that's okay, and that you might improve your business. You might end up somewhere completely different. So you might think, I'm going to start open a restaurant, and you might ultimately end up developing a cooking class or a catering company because you realize in the process, oh, I really actually enjoy cooking for others, but I like teaching people about cooking, or I like cooking for others, but I like doing it in different environments every week. I don't want to be beholden to one place. So you're letting yourself learn, you're reading your own emotions throughout the process of how different interactions with people, different interactions with the business process might change your values and might change what you ultimately want to do in the business. So if we take that effectuation approach, we really need to focus on knowing ourselves, knowing who you are. So going back to that idea I mentioned earlier about really listing out, we call them your tips, your talents, interests, passions, and skills, and thinking about where your values in your life are, and will that new venture fulfill those values, fulfill those passions and interests? Will it capitalize on the skills that you have, or push you to develop skills that you want to have? Think about what you know, not just from your CV, what's on your academic list, but what you know about life. And think about who you know. Think about the resources that you have through your network, to get connections, not just logistical support of, do I have someone in my network that has finance experience or legal experience, but who do you have around you to provide you the support as you need input on your idea and advice, or just emotional support. Again, don't be tied to a linear way of thinking. Keep an eye on new possibilities. Look for each interaction to be a data point, a piece of information that you file away to improve. And it's all about experimentation and growing from failure. So it ties back to this growth mindset. So we're taking that broader growth mindset to our new venture and to our entrepreneurial pursuits. So just quickly, we've talked a lot about entrepreneurial mindset, but entrepreneurship at the heart is taking an idea and putting it into action. It might be a new product, a new institution, a new market. It doesn't have to be, a specific product. You could just be entrepreneurial in a lot of different areas of your life. I am not an entrepreneur myself, but I aspire to be entrepreneurial in the way that I develop educational programs, in the way that I respond to needs in a charity I'm involved in. So there's ways to take this entrepreneurial mindset and entrepreneurial viewpoint into other areas of your life, even if you don't start a business. But essentially at the heart, it's idea plus action. But where do ideas come from? So that's where my expertise lies more in this. Where do we see ideas? How do we develop ideas? How do we be creative? So creativity is at the heart really of entrepreneurship. So when I talk about opportunities or ideas, a lot of times we focus on the financial aspect. I'm starting a business to make money. It's to be my career. And obviously careers and jobs sustain our our lives in a very important way. But new ventures are started for to gain value beyond just the financial value. Especially increasingly, organizations are considering that triple bottom line of, what is the social impact, what is the environmental impact of my work. So as you're thinking about opportunities to capture value through new ventures, don't just focus solely on the financial. Think about the impacts across social and environmental outcomes. So there's different views on where entrepreneurial opportunities come from. There's this discovery view that there's this magical idea out there, and we, the more we dig or the more we explore, we will find them. And there's another view that you take the knowledge, resources, information, experiences that you have, and you create opportunities. I think the literature would say, and I would agree, that it's a bit of mix of both. That there may be there's needs that people have. They need a product. There's a gap to fill, but you are able to see those needs more closely or more easily because you can use your resources to creatively think of ways in which to fulfill those needs. So creativity is involved in both seeing things, being more imaginative in your thinking what might be possible, and also in the way that you develop potential solutions for fulfilling the needs that others have. So to be more creative, this is Teresa Amable. She's one of the leading scholars on creativity. And she says there's kind of three pieces of the puzzle of what helps people be more creative. The first is your domain relevant qualities. So this is knowledge in your area. So if you're an accountant, it's your schooling or experience in accountancy. It's similar across other domains. And then there's your creativity relevant qualities, which is your creative problem solving skills, maybe your personality traits related to creativity. And then a final piece is motivation. So we might have lots of knowledge that we need to be creative, and we might have creative thinking skills, but we're not motivated. There's nothing that really drives us to think of new ideas in this particular area. We're not going to be creative. And motivation is a key psychological piece of this process. What is lighting our fire to get us to come up with ideas for new ventures with the hope of solving a need or a gap in the market? So an acronym to remember that I'll go through is LSDS, Libraries, Skills, Drive, and Space. And it ties back to what Teresa has proposed, that you need kind of a library of knowledge and skills, but we also need to have drive, that motivation piece. I've added space, which is a bonus piece of the puzzle, but it's really about taking that person that has the three pieces and putting them in the right context and giving them the space to be creative. So for library, this is about building up your capacity to be creative because you have the tools and you have the necessary building blocks in your mind in order to come up with creative solutions. So creativity is about rearranging things you kind of already know in new and different ways. And in order to do that, you need a well-stocked library. The ways which we stock our library can vary. So the first that we often think of is kind of building up that domain expertise, whether it's experience in your industry or going to school in an area, doing extra training, attending lectures online, but we're building up that library of information in a very specific area. There's this myth that the people that are new to an area are going to be the most creative because they have fresh ideas, they have an experience, they're not entrenched in the area. But really what we see is the most creative people have built up experience in a domain. We see entrepreneurs that have worked in an area for a while tend to be more successful because they have the networks, they have the understanding of what's how things are done in that domain. But we also need to be able to make unique connections, and that's where the rest of this slide comes from. Breadth of expertise comes in making yourself T-shaped. So you might have heard the term T-shaped before, but it means having that depth of expertise, but also breadth of experience. So this might come in through hobbies, through other interests you might have, prior careers, but you're not just so fixated on one single domain. You're able to see connections across different types of work or different ways of working, or even different hobbies. So I might take things from, family life or community service life and use them to help inform how I do things in my main domain of work. New experiences can add to our library because they open up new rooms, new doors of resources. I have a picture of a scuba diver here because in space travel, space exploration lore, when in the early days of NASA, when they were trying to figure out how to train astronauts to go on spacewalks, supposedly one of the early astronauts, rumor is Buzz Aldrin, but I'm not sure, was a scuba diver and saw this analog in the environment of that neutral buoyancy of scuba diving was very similar to what they expected to be in zero gravity, and that you would be working with this cumbersome equipment, you'd have limited communication capabilities with other astronauts. And so that's how they still to this day train for spacewalks, is in a giant pool in Houston. So the more you open yourself up to different experiences, the more opportunity you have to gather information and possible connections to make across different areas of your life. For connecting with others, you imagine every time you work with someone else, you're exposed to a different library and new information. So as you're talking to friends, as you're talking to colleagues, as you're moving into new career transitions, see your network as a source of additional library information. So skills is about practicing creative problem solving skills. I can't go through all the different skills related to creativity. I have, entire lectures on this, extended lectures on this, but really the first step is in seeing problems as creative problems. So this, issue I'm having with a coworker, or, this issue I'm even having at home or in life, is a creative problem. That's the first step in giving yourself permission to think differently about the problem. Breaking down the problem, really picking apart the different aspects of it. Often this might involve like drawing a mind map or a fishbone diagram, if you've ever heard of that, but really thinking through the different causes of the problem, because as you break it down, it might open up different pathways towards solutions. Generating ideas. It might be as simple as giving yourself 30 minutes to come up with as many different solutions as you can to a problem. Sometimes I think in modern work life, we don't give ourselves the space to really think deeply about possible solutions. We just immediately jump to the first one that comes to our mind, or the one that we've used most often, but really giving yourself time to think through that. Evaluating ideas, really kind of explicitly testing the options, giving yourself some criteria for what an ultimate or creative solution might be. So in starting a new business, it might be, does it fulfill my passions? Does it provide the economic or the financial outcomes that I am used to in maintaining my home life? Does it meet the social need that I'm hoping to meet? So having some clear criteria in your mind. Drive, passion, in the two types, there's two general types of motivation that people generally have: intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. So are you motivated by internal passions, desires, excitement, or are you motivated by rewards and things external to you? We tend to see intrinsic motivation is more related to creativity. And I think that's why when entrepreneurs start something that is tied to their personal values and passions, they are more likely to succeed, because they're going to be more motivated to stick with it. If you are a leader, if you're starting a venture as a leader, or you're a leader in an organization, having a unifying vision is highly motivating to people. So you hear a lot about startups, that have a clear mission, and the leader kind of embodies that mission. It can keep people kind of excited and involved, and keep you excited and involved if you have a clear goal that you're working towards. Self-care is very important. Again, if you remember back at the start of the presentation where I talked about myths, and that entrepreneurs we often think are people sacrificing their well-being essentially to be an entrepreneur, that's actually not healthy. That is not a good way to approach being creative or entrepreneurial. That actually you need to take care of yourself. We see better creativity when people are well rested and eat well and exercise. And finally, look outside the office. So if you are not particularly, if you're having trouble triggering your motivation in the work that you're currently doing, and that might be why you're here today, look for things outside of the office, outside of work even, related to family or social work, community service, that might give you inspiration that lights up that intrinsic motivation. And finally, space. So we've built up our libraries, we've developed some skills, we feel like we're more motivated, but we just don't have the time or the place to be creative, to come up with our business ideas, to work on our business ideas. Space is so critical. Mental space, physical space, space in your work is so important for creativity to be enacted, because creativity takes time, it takes energy, it takes cognitive power. So, it's not going to happen when we're overwhelmed, we're overloaded. When people are cognitively overloaded, they stick to what they know. They don't have the ability to think beyond what they're doing in that immediate moment. So if you can give yourself some mental space, even if it's 30 minutes at the end of the week to reflect on the week and think forward about what you might want to do, give yourself that time for creativity. Physical space, the environment around you can influence whether you're creative or not. Are you distracted? Some of us need a clean office, some don't. Some of us can work perfectly well in open office environments, some of us can't. But think about how your space is inhibiting or encouraging your mental processes. Job autonomy, for creativity on the job is quite important, giving people the feeling that they can control how they do their work and the decisions that they make. It gives them the feeling that, okay, if I offer an idea, it might actually be implemented. Not someone isn't telling me constantly how I have to do my job. And finally, make space for others. So listening to the ideas of others. One of my favorite quotes is to be passionate about the problem, not the solution, or be passionate about the problem, not your idea. So sometimes entrepreneurs especially can get very wedded to their idea, it's become sort of their baby. But making yourself open to feedback, open to the voices of others can improve your idea. And, just thinking back to that effectuation approach and growth mindset approach can help you see opportunities to learn and continually improve upon your idea to have a more successful business. So that's the end. I think I'm right on time of 22. If you have questions, feel free to get in touch with me. I know we have questions in the chat, and we have time for questions now. Sorry I didn't pause during the session to answer, because I know we had a Q&A, but that's the end of the slide. So sorry if it was a breeze, but
Thank
yeah.
you, Tamara. It was really interesting, and you really took the timing seriously on the dot. There have been some questions in the chat room. A couple of them you've already answered as you've gone along, but there's one, and it's interesting that you shared your quote, because somebody's actually asked, do you recommend any books, podcasts, or resources?
Yeah, so I don't know if I have a few. I think I have a few behind me. So there's some good ones. The Ethan Mollick in The Unicorn Shadow is a very short but very good one, and he really breaks down a lot of the myths. I'll type it into the chat. This is a good one so far, Made to Stick, on like thinking about your ideas and what makes ideas really stick with others. For creative problem solving, I really like a book called Zigzag. It's really good for giving you like specific techniques on improving your daily creativity. So those are just a few. If for podcasts, gosh, there's so many on entrepreneurship. I don't have a favorite, but just general, yeah, those are some good ones.
I might try and dig out whether you've done any podcasts for us, Tamara, because we
I
do.
haven't,
We
but I'd
you
like
haven't,
to.
have you?
Yeah,
We
yeah.
think. I think you probably should. We do a Core Insights podcast,
Okay.
Sonia, so you can access some of the learning that we deliver in our executive education programs through the podcast. So I'll share the link for Core Insights as well.
Yeah.
There's another question from Gina. She asks, what are some potential mistakes that learners should be aware of when starting an entrepreneurial journey? I don't know if you've come across any of those.
Yeah, so I think broadly, maybe one of the mistakes is going in so fixed on a specific idea or plan. I know I've kind of said this over and over again through the session, but being open to change and having to change your idea. And really kind of focus on building general skills, I would say. So things like being your mindset, being proactive, kind of, yeah, learning more general skills and kind of specifically focused, at least in those early days. And so as your idea develops, then kind of honing specific skills that you need for that specific venture. But I'd say early on, don't be so fixated on a single outcome, if that makes sense.
And who keeps you in check? Because I think that's quite interesting that, we talk about listening and networks, and the Janus effect is really interesting, because in the workplace you're kept in check, with certain things, barometers happening around you. But who keeps you in check when you're bouncing these solutions around?
That's a good question. And I'd say a lot of entrepreneurs, especially I would say the successful ones, build that network of people, other entrepreneurs, other mentors. I mean, we even at the University of Warwick, we have so many resources in the Warwick Innovation District and different Warwick entrepreneurs, different groups where you can get advice and get advice early. So that's maybe another response to the question about, what mistakes do people make? Get advice early. Like, don't assume that your idea is a good idea, and be open to the feedback that it's not. And that's okay. The idea doesn't have to be perfect from the beginning. so yeah, building a network of people who can call you out and be honest with you. Some people call it kind of creating your personal board of directors. So a group of people that you trust that will tell you, hey, you know, you're getting too far down this road. I don't think it's working. Or, hey, you're starting to act on that other side of the slide. Maybe it's time to rein yourself in. But yeah, a group of maybe trusted advisors, trusted mentors, and people who understand starting a business.
And I think that kind of answers Nathan's question, because he asked, do you have any tips on building a strong network and connecting with other entrepreneurial-minded individuals? But I think you kind of answered it there.
Yeah,
So I want to add anything else for Nathan?
Well, I mean, that was kind of specific to Warwick, but there's small business groups in every town and every city. I would look to them. A lot of them have open or even free networking sessions. Yeah, so small business development groups in different cities, different government agencies who support small business and entrepreneurship will host free events. Those are great ways to kind of get in, and also within the community. So let's say, you know, you want to be in a specific area, specific type of entrepreneurship, going to conferences or fairs or whatever it is specific to that area where people collect, and getting to know them, because it's not just about getting to know people who understand the entrepreneurial journey. You want to get to know people that understand that domain you're wanting to break into. That's
a great tip, actually, especially around the conferences. And then another one, I don't know if in your network tomorrow, if you've come across, Jean is asking, can you provide guidance on how adult learners can transition from being an employee to becoming a successful entrepreneur, and seeing it from the academic lens before I bring Sean and Suzanne onto the screen?
Yeah, I mean, I think this might be better for Sean and Suzanne. Yeah, I think where we see people making the transition in my life is often the people coming to get their MBA or doing an exec ed program. So really it's, you know, maybe the guidance there is to get that education, but you don't necessarily have to, I mean, sorry, WBS, there's alternative paths to getting educated in that area. But that's typically where I see, and I think it is a beneficial route to especially to making the connections. I know a lot of our MBAs make amazing connections. I was just talking to a colleague who was saying, you know, he started a business with the person sat next to him in his MBA program, and how vital those connections were.
That's a popular one. I always hear MBA students, I started a business sitting with someone sat next to me. Was the person next to them. Tamara, stick with us. Thank you so much for the lecture. I really enjoyed it. And thank you for those really great tips as well, for the questions. I'm going to bring Sean and Suzanne. Tamara, stick with us just in case there are any more questions for you. Sean and Suzanne, I've got lots of great things to say about you, but do you want to introduce yourselves? Shall I start with you, Suzanne?
Yes, sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
My name is Susanna. I'm originally from Germany. I've lived in the UK for the last 17 years. My corporate background has predominantly been in product development in food. I used to work for Twinings Tea and the product development, marketing and supply chain consolidation. I run a company called the Street Bake Shop and another small company called Bori. What I tell you is very much about the bake shop because Bori is still a lot smaller. So my husband ran his own corporate catering business for many years, and his philosophy has always been to make everything super high quality, food excellence, and everything from scratch. The only thing that he didn't yet make for that business was his own bread. So he decided to move the business into bigger premises so he could also incorporate an artisan bakery in it. We moved into the new premises in March 2020. And you'll all remember what happened in March 2020. The lockdowns were announced and there was no more corporate catering. So we found ourselves in a position where we had just invested about £500,000 into kitting out this bakery and these premises, but with no business. So we had a choice to say, we'll wait and sit tight and see what happens, or to really think on our feet and see what we would do. So we did the latter, and we took a couple of weeks to really say, okay, and what now? And then put all our effort into turning the business around and starting a direct-to-customer business. So we opened a retail site, we opened a retail bakery, and now we're looking back onto a £2 million business, 42 employees, and it's thriving. And that was coming up to 3 years ago.
And I should say our connection with Suzanne is through the Distance Learning MBA, which you did with us a couple of years ago now, wasn't it, Suzanne?
I graduated in January this year.
This year. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
and just to pass over to Sean, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Good afternoon, everybody. And thanks, Tamara, for the lecture. I've watched you lecture before, and even though I've seen a lot of that content, I still learned something new from you. So thank you very much for that. So my name's Sean O'Shea, and I'm the founder of a company called Craft Your Culture. I started my company 6 months ago. I still don't recognize myself as an entrepreneur yet, but I guess that will come in time. But my background is actually all in technology and leadership. I was in companies such as Microsoft. I ran startups all around technology, and my main area of specialism was growth. So I actually didn't come from a background that naturally led itself to me being in a position I am today. Somebody said squiggly career earlier. That's very much how I describe my career path to date, because the area I'm in now, the role that I play now in the company that I've started, focuses on how do you optimize how people work together to achieve a goal. So it's culture design. That group of people could be a leadership team of 8 to 10 people. It could be a whole company of thousands of people. But I find it endlessly fascinating. So I'm 6 months into that journey as we speak. And I started the behavioral science executive diploma back in October of last year. So I'm not quite finished yet. I've got 2 assignments and a dissertation to go before I get to that stage.
Thank you so much, Sean and Suzanne, and coming back and joining us. I think we'll start with asking, what were your motivations for changing to become an entrepreneur? And there was a question I saw earlier about making that transition from an employee to an entrepreneur and how difficult or easy that was. Should we start with yourself, Suzanne?
Yeah, I've never considered myself an entrepreneur, and it took me a long time to transition. I'm naturally quite risk averse, and I liked the stability that the corporate role provided. And but I then realized that actually my skill set, I would consider myself quite a generalist, and I've realized that my skill set is hugely beneficial in a small business. And while I was sort of fighting it for many years, I did the MBA working with my husband and the corporate role at the same time, and I realized this is just mental. This is crazy. And then I eventually took the plunge and joined the family business, the business with my husband, full time. My motivators and why I like it so much is it's you see the immediate results of the effort you put in, and that is for the better and for worse, because when you work hard, you see the impact, and it's wonderfully rewarding. But you also know that if you let something slip, there's no one else to pick it up. There's no one else to pick up the slack. It's on your shoulders, and you make it happen. It's incredible, but it also means it can be quite addictive. So you have to find measures to chill, to switch off, to disconnect, because you could just carry on working 24/7 if you wanted.
Thanks, Suzanne. And Sean, do you want to share your story about becoming an entrepreneur?
Yeah, so I actually did not intend to become an entrepreneur at all. I was taking executive coaching at the time. I was deciding on my career change, and I remember saying to my coach on the first session we had, I don't know what I want to do, but the one thing I know I do not want to do is start my own company. And I was very clear, which was, a great advertisement for coaching, because, that made me think differently about it. And I understood actually what I wanted to do was follow a passion and a curiosity that I had that had led me to become so unsettled in my previous company. I had a desire and an itch to learn about culture and human behavior. And the reason for starting the company was to use that as a vehicle to help me pursue that learning full time, and almost to commercialize my ability to constantly learn something that I felt incredibly fascinating. So I think back to the point around motivation that Tamara was talking about, I had the intrinsic motivation from that point. My job then was to work out, well, could you then bring things together to make this possible? And when you're part of a company and you're part of a machine and you're an employee, you're very much, your mindset is influenced by those people around you. And there's a bazillion ways that you can talk yourself out of doing something. The people around you will naturally not be wanting you to go and start your own thing. The people you spend so much time talking to on the average day as an employee are probably not going to be positive influences on you going off and trying your own thing. So having a bit of a gap that enables you to think about things differently and change your mindset helps you to make that decision, I think, with a much better perspective and with less bias and influence around you to help you apply better judgment to it. And once you do that, you then realize that once you take the step to become an entrepreneur, you've learned so much as an employee. You've got so many experiences that other people just don't have, because you're the sum of your own experiences. Other people don't have those experiences, they have different ones. And then you can take a lot of that with you. That means you're not actually starting from scratch most of the time. There's a huge amount that you bring at the starting point that you probably don't appreciate that you've got at the point that you start.
I'm just going to carry on with you, Sean, because I'm going to pass Gina's question on to you. So, because you've both been adult learners, and Gina's question was around providing some guidance on how adult learners can transition from being an employee to becoming a successful entrepreneur.
Okay, so it's the question around, because I haven't got the chat open, sorry.
Yeah, so it says, how can adult learners transition from being an employee to becoming a successful entrepreneur, and any guidance you can provide on that? Yeah,
sure. I do get asked this a lot. So the thing that I would, and the one consistent piece of advice I always give, and this is just from my own perspective. Remember, my business is very different to Susanna, so I'm looking forward to Susanna's point on this. My business is a consultancy business, so it's about my knowledge and my learning, and then applied to a customer's context. My business started because of a passion. So I was curious about something that I wanted to spend time learning about, and I wanted to spend more time in that space. What I did when I look back was see it as a big jump. I had to leave my company to start a new company to pursue this. The advice I'd go back and give myself now is to actually start a lot smaller. If you've got something like me, where you've got a passion or an interest in something, don't see it as you have to make a big step and do that thing, and that's the big thing that you go and do, because that comes with a load of pressure and expectation that is not healthy to ensure that you have a successful business that starts from that point. I would say instead, find ways to spend a bit more time in the thing that you're curious about whilst you're still an employee, if that works for you. You know, go to some events, take some courses, meet new people on LinkedIn, whatever it is, but take some small steps to help you spend a bit more time in the thing you find interesting. That will open up doors. That will help you, I guess, qualify your level of interest. And then it will help you make better decisions at a point when you do feel like you want to make a big change.
Thanks, Sean. I'm going to kind of ask you a similar question, Suzanne, because your business kind of, well, the spark came from whilst you were studying on the MBA. So we're obviously a business school. And what role did being on the MBA play in your journey into entrepreneurship?
It was a big catalyst. It hasn't, on the one hand, it's equipped me with the tools to ask the right questions and to pull ideas apart and to write a business plan. But that is just very factual and very boring in a sense. But what the MBA really has done is opened my mind to opportunity and evaluate risk and evaluate opportunity better. And what it's done for me is actually, it's given me the confidence to say, I can pull this off. And even if I can't, even if I make mistakes, then it will have been a learning journey that will be a stepping stone for something else that comes after. And I think my mind was quite closed, if you want to talk about closed mindset or growth mindset. My mind was quite closed to opportunity previously. And I've come away from the MBA thinking this world is full of opportunity. And no matter where I'll find myself in the future, there will be another opportunity. And that is very freeing. And when I look back, I think it's totally the right thing to do. So yeah, I think that it has influenced my decisions hugely.
I'm quite conscious of time, but I'm going to stick with you for a minute, Suzanne, because I know you did some interesting research into why startups fail, and it'd be great to hear a little bit about that.
Yes. So I wrote my dissertation around why businesses, despite or totally unrelated from industry, during COVID, why some failed and why some succeeded. And I looked very much at founder-led businesses and what about the founder, him or herself, drove success or failure. And very much, it actually echoes what Tamara spoke about earlier, very much around this mindset. Is it an opportunity or is it a threat? So what happens around me? Do I feel like I'm threatened by it, or is it something where I can pull this apart and see where I can add value and something might develop as a result? And the other point that Tamara mentioned earlier, don't be too wedded to one single idea. You might go in and say, I know exactly what I will do, but be open to changing that. So I found that the founders I spoke to who said, but that is my business and it needs to work, either it works or I'm going to close it down, they failed. Whereas others that said, and then what we did, and this is what we experimented with, and this is what we did for a few months, and then we moved on to this. It created a whole culture of embracing ambiguity and embracing change. And those are the founders whose businesses succeeded. There is a lot around confidence. And I think being an entrepreneur does require you to have a level of base confidence. And the last thing I would say is action. There's a big temptation when something strange or scary happens to shut down and to be a little bit like paralyzed. But action, despite adversity, makes all the difference. It might not be the right act, but you see the result and you're like, okay, I'll do this now and I'll do that. But don't be paralyzed. Put yourself out there and try again and again.
That's some great advice, Suzanne. I'm keeping one eye on the clock because I know we've got to leave the room at 2 o'clock, but I wanted to bring Sean in here because, Sean, you're obviously an expert in culture, and I just wanted to ask you a quick question. How important is culture even when you're on your own and you haven't yet employed your first employee?
Yeah, I'll make it very short and sweet. The success of most companies will be determined by the culture, how well you enable your people to work together and optimize the way they work towards a common goal. And it starts with the first person. The culture of a company is as a company's DNA. Everyone will be completely different. But your first hires, your first decisions, the first bit of customer work you do that sets a tone and a brand and an expectation, all of that comes from your personality as a founder. So the bit of advice I'd give is be aware of yourself. Self-awareness at this point will help you understand why the company starts taking shape in the way that it does. And then that starts to become a bigger thing that almost can become unwieldy. But if you're aware at the start, then that will really help you.
Thank you. I see Heather's popped up. I think that's our kind of reminder that we've got to leave at 2 o'clock. But I just want to say thank you, Sean, Suzanne, and Tamara. I can actually listen to you all day. I love the topic of entrepreneurship. I think it's just fascinating. So I don't know if we're going to have to do a longer session at WBS together. But thank you, Heather, for having us. Here's a quick download if anybody wanted to. I mean, I mentioned Core Insights. I will drop the link in here if you're interested in some of the stuff that we've spoken about today. Core Insights is a great point to access. I did share Suzanne and Sean's details there, but if you want to get in touch with them, you can do. And thank you for having us.
Absolutely. I will just say, just on a final note from my perspective, I almost forgot that I was with you on the event. I was listening. It was so amazing. Thank you so much. I was completely immersed by it all myself. So I'm glad that everybody else has enjoyed it as well. Thank you to everybody in the chat saying thank you and goodbye. And thank you there to the team at WBS. Thank you for a fantastic session. And it's time to wrap up. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. Thank you.
Bye-bye.